Hello, and welcome to Thinkling's Books. My name's Deborah, and today we're going to be discussing stakes. Stakes are the answer to the reader's question of, yes, but why should I care? Stakes can be internal or external, and for the most part are both, and they should have a quite narrow focus, imminent world-devastating effects. And finally, it should be possible for the protagonist to either win or lose. Let's start with internal versus external. By internal stakes, I mean stakes that directly impact the protagonist, and by external, they impact everyone else. So an example of internal stakes would be the protagonist's feelings and relationship and status and job, and even to some extent the protagonist's life. And a fantastic example of a book in which there are really only internal stakes is Madness by Maria Hornbacher. Madness, or Madness: A Bipolar Life, is the author's memoir about having bipolar with psychosis. And during this book, the protagonist is fighting with her own mood disorder and with her own mind and perceptions, and also with her struggles with alcoholism and eating disorder. And the disorder is getting worse and worse, and she's getting misdiagnosed, and she herself is reacting badly to it. But ultimately, that's what's at stake. What's at stake is, will our protagonist spend the rest of her life in a permanent state of manic or depressive psychosis in a mental hospital? The stakes are not, what will happen to her significant other? What will happen to her job? Will they have to hire someone else? On the other end of the spectrum, you have your action thriller James Bond type story, where the stakes are all external. So in this case, our protagonist is in no danger. Like if he fails, nothing's going to happen to him. His romantic life will be fine. He'll still be alive. But if he doesn't succeed, the villain's bomb is going to go off, killing thousands, or they'll release a plague, or something like that. And we'll come back later to how effective this sort of stake actually is. But finally, I want to move on to the most common type of stakes, which are both internal and external. And for this, I'm going to use A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens as my example. Or the Muppet version, which I also love. In A Christmas Carol, we have two main sets of stakes. The first are internal to Scrooge. Scrooge's personal mental health, good behavior, and eventual salvation or damnation rely upon his changing. Those are what's at stake for him. And we learn to really care about these through following him with this spirit of Christmas past, and seeing what he once was, seeing him as a child, as a young man, and seeing his slow evolution, and realizing he doesn't have to be like this. And then we move on to The Ghost of Christmas Present, and we get our second stake. Now, throughout following Scrooge around, we do see a whole variety of people who are impacted by his bad behavior. We saw his ex-fiancée, we saw his nephew, we even eventually see one of the families that he loans money to and suffered from it. But the main stake here comes from Bob Cratchit Jr. Because if Scrooge does not change his ways, then Junior will die within the year. And that is our external stake. Now note here how focused the stakes are. Yes, Scrooge does affect lots and lots of people, and there's just sort of background stakes, like, what about the people he's lent money to? But the focus stays on Scrooge and on Junior. And this is good writing, and this is important. And the reason why it's important to have this narrow focus when it comes to stakes is that human beings naturally can't focus on everything at once. What we need is a smaller group or a smaller individual or only a few individuals to focus on. And you see this a lot actually in charity work. If it's pretty well known through statistics and also just through stories people tell that if you really want someone to give to charity, you don't go to them with statistics and say X number of children are starving in Africa, because these sort of faceless masses just aren't motivational for people. What's motivational is if you get a picture of a single starving child and you say, this child is hungry and you can help this child if you give money. So, how many people or how many groups of people can be at stake for the stakes to still be effective? And there's no perfect answer to this. I haven't studied it scientifically, but what I have read scientifically years back was just a very interesting article on how, on average, humans can remember and keep track of up to 7 items or 7 groups of items at once. There's a reason why in America our base phone numbers are 7 digits long. It's because most people, if you tell them a 7-digit phone number, will be able to remember it at least in the short term. And we see something similar actually when it comes to books. In The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship has 9 members. But generally speaking, we don't remember them as 9 members, unless we know the story really, really well. Instead, we remember them as Frodo, Sam, the other 2 hobbits, Gandalf, the elf and dwarf, Aragorn, the other human. And these are sometimes even clumped down lower by, the hobbits, the humans, the wizard, and the other ones. We clump them down, and that makes them easy to remember and to track and to follow and to care about. If your focus is too broad, if you don't have faces to put to the people you're supposed to care about, it's really hard to care about them. And why make the reader do that much work? Because a lot of the time they won't. And that brings me to the next point, which is stakes should be imminent and world devastating. By world devastating here, I don't mean that the stakes they might blow up the Earth. Actually, in general, the Earth might blow up is not a good stake to have for the simple reason that it's not believable. Most readers don't think that the author is actually going to carry through and blow up the Earth. In fact, the only book I can off the cuff think of in which they do blow up the Earth is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that's actually not a stake in the book. That's just something that happens. It's a tertiary plot point. Our stakes revolve around our protagonist and his relationships and how is he going to survive now that the Earth's been blown up. No, by world devastating, I mean stakes ought to be potentially devastating to the world of the narrative. So in Hornbacher's Madness, the world of the narrative is her personal world, her perceptions, her experiences, her relationships, her battle with her mood disorder. And that's the world that will be devastated if she doesn't succeed. And doesn't succeed imminently, because the disorder is getting worse and worse. And in some ways she's already past the point of no return. And if she doesn't reform how she's behaving and how she's interacting with her disorder, if she doesn't accept it and get good treatment, it will be too late for her. And if Scrooge does not change his ways, within a year Junior will die. And if Bond doesn't defuse that bomb now, then it will go off. And it will be too late. And all of the people that he was trying to protect, the world and the narrative, will die. And that leads me to my final point, which is it has to be possible for your protagonist to succeed or to fail. And for this point, I actually want to use Star Trek, the original series, as an example. So let's say that in an imaginary episode, we have 3 possible stakes. One stake is that, will Captain Kirk live or die? One is, will this main character that we've never seen before but we've brought in specifically for this episode die? And the third is, will the red shirt die? Well, in the first case, Captain Kirk's not going to die. He's just not. The showrunners cannot afford to kill him off, and therefore the story cannot afford to allow him to lose. There is no uncertainty here. The watcher knows going in that they will succeed, and because the watcher is certain of this, what's the worry? Why should we care? We know what the outcome is. And then the other end of the spectrum, will that red shirt live or die? The red shirt's going to die. In 99% of cases, the red shirt is already doomed. So again, there's no point in the watcher investing because they already know the outcome. On the other hand, that main character that Star Trek brought in just for that episode, well, we know from the narrative promises of Star Trek what sort of show it is, and we've seen from previous episodes that Star Trek is both perfectly willing to kill them off and perfectly willing to give them a happy ending, and indeed perfectly willing to come up with a third solution. And therefore, there is reason for the watcher to care and to invest, because what happens, what the protagonist does, what that character does, what the villain does, they matter. They can have an effect. The writers can afford either to have the stakes fulfilled or failed. And so the reader can care. And because our focus is so narrow on this one character that we're able to put a face to, we can care. And because the stakes are presumably both for this character and maybe for the larger world as a whole, we can care about that too. And because we know that within the course of 45 minutes, these stakes will come true or will not. They are imminent and they are world devastating to this character. We care. And that's good stakes. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this video at all helpful or informative, please hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell to learn of new videos. Until next time.